do research. What about images? So many times people will forget to acknowledge images in their presentations or in their speeches. And then reference lists. Are they really necessary and how do we use them? But first of all, let's have a look at plagiarism. Basically, plagiarism is to present the work of someone else as if it is your own. You can have a look at Harvard's definition there, Harvard 2026, presenting someone else's work, ideas, graphs, statistics, quotes, whatever it is, as if it is your own. And plagiarism is not always intentional. There is not necessarily an intention by the person to mislead the audience. It can also be unintentional, but it remains plagiarism. Then I want to say something about paraphrasing. People think that if they paraphrase the information, if they put it in their own words, then they don't need to acknowledge the original author because it's your words. But we still need to acknowledge the original author. The fact that you paraphrase the information doesn't make you the owner of that information. You just paraphrased someone else's content. The harm of not giving credit, you can really mislead your audience. You can disrespect the original author, and you can undermine your own credibility. If you say something and someone else says, no, this was not, you are not the first person to say this, someone else said this, you can really undermine your own credibility. But let's talk about common knowledge. As a rule of thumb, common knowledge, you don't need to reference or acknowledge common knowledge. But also common or general knowledge is very difficult because my general knowledge is not your general knowledge. You are maybe an expert on, for example, motor cars or Harleys, but I don't know anything about it. So I can't, what is your general knowledge is not mine. So it's very different. We can say, for example, you drive on the left-hand side of the road and someone overseas read your speech, and that is not true anymore. So as a rule of thumb, general knowledge does not have to be acknowledged. But if we say something, for example, there were floods in KwaZulu-Natal, then you don't need to reference that. That is more or less common knowledge. But if we say there were floods in KwaZulu-Natal in 2022, in which 452 people died, then we need to reference that. We need to acknowledge it. We need to say when to do it. And then how to fix it? Keep a research log as you write. Always have the information ready. Maybe you're not going to use all of it in your speech or in your presentation. But later when you have dinner, someone will ask you, listen, where did you find that? Then you need to be able to say, oh, I found it in the Harvard Business Review in April 2026. You can more or less give the details so that that person will be able to find it. What is acknowledgement? According to human learning in 2026, every time you use someone else's ideas, arguments, opinions, you need to acknowledge that author. So it's basically giving credit. It applies to facts, quotes, ideas, stories, and images. People tend to forget about those images. In a Toastmaster speech, acknowledgement is usually verbal, and it's usually woven into the sentence. So it won't be that staccato referencing of academic writing or academia. It will be woven naturally into the sentence. If it is something out of your own experience, something you lived, you experienced yourself, of course then no citation is needed. And think of acknowledgement as, it's always like gossiping, or tagging someone else in a post. You just give credit to another person. The moment you are doing a speech and someone says you know that you need to acknowledge. Because you can stand here, you can make as if you are an expert, you can give facts and opinions, says who? Then you know that you need to acknowledge that specific information. How to do it? there's a specific recipe. Usually you need to give the author, you need to give a year, and you need to give some context. What is happening here. And I gave you some examples here. As Bernard Brown writes in 2006 in Doing Greatly, Justin Bieber had a song in 2011 with the title. You can see every time there is a year. In his 2022 TED Talk, Simon Sinek argued that. So every time, just a basic recipe. You don't need to give a lot of information, but someone must be able to get that information afterwards. So, this is just a paragraph. Always keep your listener in mind. If you want to acknowledge the same person over and over again, instead of saying brown, 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 you can make use of joining words. For example, this in the same article. Furthermore, the same author also stated that. In addition, so now you can see that you kept your audience in mind. Your audience can now see that this is still from the same article. It's not necessary to say brown, 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 brown every time. Your reader, your listener can see, okay, this is still by Brown. How to do research? I think it's really important. If in our Toastmaster speeches, we can't just use anything to support what we are trying to say. It's important to use credible resources. Check the date. If you're going to do a talk on iPhones and you're using a 2009 source, that is not valid. Or maybe unemployment rates and the problem of it, and you're using a 2011 source. No, it's not going to give power to your speech. It's even better if you can cross-reference. You can maybe say dark chocolate is very good for stress relief according to Brown. Black agreed with that in his 2006 article, saying that if you eat a lot of chocolate, dark chocolate, you will be able to cope with academic pressure. However, Kindle 2022 didn't agree with the statement. So you can have a secondary statement which agrees with your original, but you can also have a contradicting statement. That is how you do research, and that is how you make your speeches powerful. Keep a research log. If you're not going to use the full details in your speech, just know about them so that you can use them afterwards if someone asks you about it. And then I want to say something about Wikipedia and blogs. Usually Wikipedia is not a good source. I love Wikipedia. Wikipedia is much reader than previous years. The reference lists of Wikipedia are quite good. So I think in academia, no Wikipedia. In Toastmasters, why not? They are really good nowadays. Blogs. Be careful for blogs, because if you're using a blog, make sure what is the credibility of that specific person. You and I can also start a blog, but why should people listen to us? Does the person have certain credentials, maybe the chairperson of a specific organization, or someone with academic credentials? Make sure that you're not using just any blog. I just want to give you a few search tips on Google. I hope you can see there. So for example, I want articles on strategic leadership, but then maybe it must be academic articles. Then you can type into your Google search bar site:/ac.za. You can even add PDF. And if you want articles from the past 5 years, you can say after:2021. Now you will retrieve academic articles on strategic leadership, which you will have access to because it will be in PDF and it will be published in the past 5 years. The second one, if you just add an asterisk after that full stop, you will also retrieve academic articles from other universities. For example, ac.uk or ac.nz for New Zealand universities. The next one, :edu, then you will retrieve articles which is educational. And for example, say you want government articles, South African government articles, then you put in your site:/gov.za. Images and photos. If you didn't take the photo yourself, please credit it. You can just add a small citation, either at the end of, at the bottom of the image, or just at the bottom of the page. If you if possible, use free image sites. For example, Unsplash, Pixels, and Pixabay. They offer free images. I think it's good. There's no copyright issues. You won't intrude copyright, but I think it's just good practice to store everything. Creative Commons, you are good. You're welcome to use Creative Commons images, but you still need to credit it. That is a rule of Creative Commons. And then, Creative Commons, they are copyright protected. So it's very dangerous to use them if you do not credit them. And then the same recipe, the title, that's the source and the date. I quickly want to say something about AI generated images. You still need to do it. You can just say OpenAI 2026, but you need to credit it. You need to give your reader, your audience, the indication that this was generated by AI. Reference list, my time is running out. Have it on your last slide. Have it at the end of your handout. Just the basic details, but it must be present. Key takeaways: good evidence make a great speech. Proper acknowledgement makes a trustworthy speaker. And remember to credit those images. So in your next speech, I want to challenge you. Try to use at least one or two resources and notice what a difference it makes to your speech and to your audience as well. This is just an example of a reference list. Thank you so much.
So we now have an opportunity for questions and answers. So anyone with a question for Esther, we've got about 5 minutes for questions. Steve?
You mentioned AI images. I started using Compilation quite a lot. And I see sometimes it will give, after a paragraph, it might give like a source at the bottom, but not on everything. So what do we do with AI?
You're not talking about that short paragraph if you, for example, do a Google search and then you give you where it comes from?
No, I'm saying like if I'm in Word, for instance,
okay.
and it says and I put information in the top block, and then I say, give me a document, I give it a lot of information, and then it will give me a document there.
Okay.
But it doesn't always give me sources and stuff.
Yeah. So the big problem with AI and sources is that AI hallucinates. It gives you sources which do not exist. I flagged 5 master students for the misuse of AI in the past 2 weeks just because I couldn't find their sources. They would say no. Joe Black published an article on dark chocolate in 2011. Then it was Joe Brown who published in 2006 an article on dark rivers. So AI really hallucinates. You can't. AI is like that friend you can never trust. You need to double check everything. So, for example, Christine, if you ask AI, so if it created an image for you, you can just credit the tool. You can say Compilation or OpenAI, which refers to ChatGPT, or you can use Claude, or whatever DALL-E, or whichever tool you used. If it presented information to you, now you need to double check that information. You need to do a search and see, can I find a credible source which can support what this AI fluff is saying to me? So then you need to go and see, can I just find someone credible? You can ask the tool for a credible resource, but you can't trust that resource. You always need to go back and say, does this really exist? Because if someone in your audience raise a hand and say, I'm sorry, but that is not true, no, it won't be happening. Yes.
I've heard in debating or not the debating, speaking, I've Afrikaans FRK, which is Afrikaans culture, that kids go to extreme lengths to cite their references, like high school, blah, 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 spending so much time on citing the references in a global speech that it's really excessive. So I think like that's what you implied as well, like just a bit of detail in the year, the month, perhaps, in the case where they citation work, and that's sufficient. And if you use slides, then you can input more detail on the slide and say that the rest of the detail is on the slide apart from the slide.
Yeah. I think Nando, you will be able to give more detail because I think debating is totally different. You need to give more information.
It's actually a webinar which is really only sound.
I can remember.
Well, if I may, when it comes to debating, it all depends on your intent. If you are in a competition and you're going to cite something that happened or an occurrence or an event, then yes, you need to state where you got that information from. And I always tell, when I still coached, I used to coach and tell the teams, in your opening, give the information, tell everybody where you're getting the information from there, in your opening speech. And then take the information, and it's going to sound very dodgy, but you massage it for your own purposes, right? Do you have to give the exact information? It depends on the context of the competition. Yes, you have to, especially the collegiate competitions and general debating. Yes, at our Toastmasters debates, we insist that guys do that, but you don't have to cite the entire article and the name and everything. You can just say Eric Fromm in 1936 said that we all behave in groups. That's sufficient. That is sufficient in a speech. And if someone questions you, just have it backed up, because the thing about a debate is that you are very limited on time, so you need to push through. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Nando. Well, let's give Esther another. Sorry, we don't have time. You're welcome to ask questions at lunchtime, or when you're afterwards. Maybe you want to ask. I'm sure you're welcome. Let's give Esther another.